We turn faith into kind of a mental assent. This may go all the way back, and you don't need that history lesson, but it may go all the way back to the early 1600s when René Descartes declared that the very reason I know that I exist is that I think, therefore I am. And therefore there was kind of a separation. It's not so much what I do, it's not my body. I can separate my thinking. And then suddenly there's no real relationship. Of course, the Bible is foreign to that very concept. In Scripture, when you turn to Scripture, faith is about how you live. Faith is a verb in many ways, right? So you cannot reduce it to this. Here's how it connects, and let me say that before we get to the text. Faith creates focus in your life. Remember this, faith creates focus in your life. It directs your life. Not just your thinking, but your life. And you kind of know what I mean when I say that if you think about it a little bit, right? If you think about it, how do I determine anything? It is kind of what you're convicted of, you kind of do. And it's about bringing things into focus. If you take a very quick picture and you kind of move your camera, you're not clear, it gets blurry. And you can't really tell what is there. You kind of can maybe figure it out, but you don't see anything with clarity. But then if you have real good camera and you have a low aperture, right, a big kind of opening where lots of light can come in, you can focus very narrowly. You've seen that. You see a portrait of someone that sticks out very, very sharp, and then everything else becomes blurry. Yes? That's exactly what faith does, if you think about it for just a little bit, right? And then everything around somewhat becomes dim. This is what matters. And I want us to kind of think about that a little bit this morning, because it ties into how do you love where you live. Well, what does that mean? To have great faith, or large faith if you want to talk, it's not about being able to believe just about anything. It's about having deep trust that God speaks the truth, and I can live on the basis of His Word. Faith certainly has nothing to do with I believe in myself. It has everything to do with your trust in God. And so I want us to kind of look at this, right, and just see what's going on with this. We're reading, as we have been, from Acts chapter 2, the beginning of the church. And we mentioned earlier on that the book of Acts kind of is this early history of the earliest church. And we talked about several times, if you haven't been here the last or haven't had a chance to hear this, I'm encouraging you to kind of go back and look at this. I'll read just a couple of verses from that very first sermon that was ever preached after the outpouring of the Spirit. That is Peter's sermon of the day of Pentecost. And he stood up, it says, and then in verse 7, as he was preaching, he said, "And it will be in the last days, says God, that I will pour out my Spirit upon all people. And then your sons and your daughters will prophesy, your young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. I will even pour out my Spirit on my servants in those days, both men and women. And they will prophesy. And I'll display wonders in heaven above and signs on the earth below." I'm going to jump, if you will, if you have your Bibles, you can do. If not, just follow here. I want to jump to chapter 11 of Hebrews and just see this expression of faith, kind of like in a history lesson, if you will, of how faith works. Verse 8, chapter 11 of Hebrews, "By faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed and set out for a place that he was going to receive as an inheritance. And he went out, even though he did not know where he was going." By faith he stayed as a foreigner in the land of promise, living in tents. Glad we're not doing this today, yes? Living in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, or co-heirs of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundation, whose architect and builder is God. By faith, even Sarah herself, when she was unable to have children, received power to conceive offspring, even though she was past the age, since she has considered that the one who had promised was faithful. Therefore, from one man, in fact, from one as good as dead, came offspring as numerous as the stars of the sky and as innumerable as the grains of sand along the sandshore. These all died in faith, although they had not received the things that they were promised. But they saw them from a distance, greeted them, and confessed that they were foreigners and temporary residents on the earth. And then verse 17, by faith Abraham was tested, offered up Isaac, and he received the promises, and yet he was offering his one and only son, the one whom it had been said, your seed will be called through Isaac. And let me just jump down to verse 29. By faith, they crossed the Red Sea. And he's now talking, of course, as Israel is leaving Egypt. As though they were on dry land. And when the Egyptians attempted to do this, they were drowned. I want to talk to you a little bit about faith and life's meaning this morning. If you look at these texts, they're pretty powerful. They speak exactly about this. If I were going to ask you, what is most important in your life? Maybe even a better question, what really motivates you? What gets your wheels going, so to speak? What excites your soul? If that was my question to you, no matter who you are, regardless even if you're a Christian or not, sooner or later, we will get to the conversation about life, purpose, and meaning. Because you can't not talk about these things if we talk about motivation, if we talk about what really gets you going. That is the centerpiece of it all. What is it that you believe about life deepest down? That will come out. And you may ask me, why is that? Well, follow me here, friends. It is because that which is coincidental, that which is just haphazard, this which just feels that it's just random, there's no kind of purpose, it just happens. The distance between all that and what we are just somewhat indifferent toward is very little. If it just happened randomly, if it's coincidental, it might as well not have happened. The opposite of that is, of course, that which has purpose, that which is clearly working toward a goal, that which is intentional. That brings meaning. We're working toward that. We're seeing that. That has meaning. That's where we ultimately land, and you can kind of test yourself in that. If you're not sure about how you do that, just look back in your life. What is it that you give your greatest focus on? What truly deep down motivates you? That will reveal the deepest tenets of your faith. That's kind of how it works. When there is goal, when there is the focus, when there is meaning, there's motivation. There's new power for life. And may I say this, that the greatest desperation that anyone can ever face as a human being is that we lose that. And I'm not so sure that that's not exactly what has happened. If you may be sitting at home someplace, wherever you might be, contemplating life right now. What am I all about? What is this all about? The greatest inspiration that anyone can feel and find is, of course, that we have lost any kind of purpose. That we can't find, that we experience ourselves as just coincidental, as random. We just happen to be. A man and a woman got together, and here we are, and we don't know why, and we can't figure out what it is. It's just one kind of fussy mess, all of it. But friends, let me tell you this. That is why Christian faith, genuine, life-giving Christian faith helps, because it'll focus you in to see what is your purpose. What is it that gives meaning? Why is it that I need to love where I live? What is the purpose of my life? You simply cannot separate those things without going wild or losing purpose. And so we need to see what's going on with this. And we need to recognize that God has called us. He has called you, each and every one of you, those who are not here today for whatever reason. He has called us for a purpose. There's something He wants us to learn and to know and to do. Just think about it for just a moment. Life's meaning is found when you focus your faith and recognize that God is the one that you can trust with everything. Faith is not just that you have some ideas about God, and because you appreciate those ideas in your head, you're going to go to heaven sometime. That's not what the Christian faith is about. That was a notion that kind of developed, in the Enlightenment period, let me just put it that way, after the Reformation a while back. But look here when we look at this text. Just look in your text if you have it right here. We need to recognize what God is all about. And if you look here, you'll see exactly how that is spelled out. How all of the book of Acts tries to spell this out for us, and it is crystallized in this kind of a quote that Peter is giving from the book of Joel in the Old Testament, a prophecy of the Old Testament. And God had 3 I wills, 3 promises that focus in on that. First, I will, verse 17 and 18, pour out my Spirit upon all flesh. That's His promise. I will do that. Whether it's young or old, male or female, master, slave, everybody. Just look at it. It's an incredible kind of promise when you see this. And we're going to get back to this. And then He says, I will do wonders. That's another I will. I'll do them in heaven, and I will do them right here on earth. That's what you're driven by, right? Paul says it. In his own kind of language, when he's saying this, that I'm driven. The love of Christ compels me, because that's what I'm called to be about. My life has purpose, because this last I will is right here. I will that all who calls upon my name shall be saved. I hope you hear this, friends. I don't mean it to just be, it is theological, and it should be, because we are dealing with God. But I don't want it to be so kind of lofty that you lose the connection to your very life, wherever that might be. Your life depends on you hearing God's I will. It really does. The church here, First Baptist Allen, this congregation of believers, y'all's life depends on hearing God's I will. And this is so foundational that if we don't see it, we will miss focus and purpose, and everything kind of crazy will go on. My dad helped me very much in the beginning when I just was called to be a minister. And he said, he was a minister himself, had been so for many years before that. He said, Preben, always remember this. Focus on what matters and let all the others fight about the rest. Focus on what matters and let everybody else just fight about the rest. And that has been such a helpful guide, not only in terms of organizational understanding, but also in my own life. And he kind of lived some of that out. You know, I remember, and I won't tell you how old I am when it comes to that, right? There was a time when we all needed to have hair down to here, right? And listen, you know, I was a pastor's kid. And there were plenty of good people in the church who try to tell your kid not to have that. I have friends to this day who are not in church, who doesn't care, who kind of had a rift with their own parents over hair length. And I remember thinking then, even as a young kid, I'm thinking, who will destroy their family over hair length? Focus on what matters and let them fight about the rest. Yes? Of course, my dad's reply to all these people said, you know, that's just a fad. It'll go over. He'll cut his hair again. Smart dude. I'm still in church. Most of them are not. Are you hearing me? Don't fight the things that don't matter. Back to the text, right? That was kind of, I just got off on that. But look, what we see right here, how powerful this is. I will make you my disciples. We need to hear this, right? I will make you listen to my word. I will make you love my church. I will make you listen to your neighbors. I will make you my ambassadors in your neighborhood. I will make you love what I love, which is the world. And the world, of course, is another kind of synonym for where you live. Think about this, friends, how powerful this is. And I need to kind of get into this a little bit deeper, even when you think about Peter is preaching this first sermon. And he kind of opens it up. And he begins with a prophecy. And I thought about that a lot. Why would he begin with a prophecy that's hundreds of years old? There's so many things going on with this, right? And one of the things that we see is that when he does that, he's all of a sudden saying, of course, that what we have here is not just a new thing. God's very design from the beginning was that he would give us purpose, that this is what this is about, that loving Christ means that you love where you live, that this is an outliving, a fulfillment of what God has been about from the beginning. Maybe I can go even further into that. Maybe I can just say to you, and it might help you young people even more than many others. Why? Because the very fact that there is a prophecy that was given hundreds of years earlier shows us that history itself matters. God has taken care of history. He's given it a direction and a goal. Had everything just been a mess, just kind of one haphazard happening after the other, there would have been no way that a prophet could have spoken by the inspiration of God hundreds and hundreds of years before and said, this will happen. Are we hearing this? The very fact that there's a prophecy that is possible gives us a clear awareness that God holds history in his hands. Evil will not have the last word. He will. He holds this church's life in his hands. He holds your life in his hands. It's not just a hopeless mess of one haphazard thing after the other. There's direction, there's a goal, there's a purpose. Think about this. The question is, how does that become part of your experience? How does that become part of your experience? The close relationship that is needed with him. And the key word here, of course, is faith. It happens through your relationship with God, which is established through faith. And faith, of course, is that you trust in him. Very different from a notion where it's just certain kind of doctrinal statements that floats around in your head. That's what Hebrews says, even if we begun in the first verse of chapter 11. Right? Faith is being sure of what you hope for, certain of the things that you don't yet see. That's the very foundation for life, whether you're a Christian or not. That's how we live. We live on the basis of what we think, what we hope for, even what we can't quite see yet. And I want to point to that, even as we go back to this chapter 11. Did you notice what we read in verse 8? You know, it all happens by faith. Abraham, it was by faith that he trusted God, even when he did not know where he had to go. That's verse 8. Just read it when you come home, if nothing else. Take a note on this, right? When he did not know where he was going, the Bible says. That's the where. He trusted God and obeyed even when he didn't know how things would develop. Sarah would have a child, it says in verse 11. And she didn't know how that could happen. Why? She was of age and he was as good as dead. The Bible says that. He trusted and obeyed. You can go on, verse 13, without knowing when things were happening. People were dying. They had heard God promise. They had worked on it, but they didn't see the fulfillment of it. And even the where that is coming in verse 17, he trusted and obeyed even when he didn't know why. Go sacrifice your only son, Isaac, who, by the way, is the one who's going to be the one through whom numerous people will come to faith. Not knowing where, when, why, and how, still obeying. Because he knew, God, that there was a focus, there was a goal. He knew that he could love, if you will, where he lived, that he could be this representative of God because his life was not floundering, because he trusted God. And life in our church, friends, life for you as an individual Christian is found that way. The future is unknown. It is for every one of us, and it is for this church as well. But God's promises are always coming down to this one sentence: I will be with you all the days until the end. Are we getting this? There's not a whole lot of difference between him saying, I'll pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and him saying, I'll be with you all the days until the end. Because what happens when you lean into that? What happens when we lean into that? Everything changed. The Spirit changed. I think we've all been in places where we've set that. You know, you come back to a place you hadn't been in a long time, or just get to a place. It's like the Spirit is different now. You know that phrase, right? It's like there's a different spirit here now. That's exactly the point. Things that when we lean into God's promises and just see faith as living out what He has called us to do, as participating in His purpose, which is to love this world, the Spirit is changing everything. It will change you. It will change us. It will change your home. It will change your workplace. It will change your friendships. It will change what you watch on TV. It will change what you click on the computer. It will change everything. God gets involved, and life finds meaning. And living out His purposes gives our life focus. Not this, not that, not all these other things. Let the others fight on that. I'm focusing on what matters. And what matters is what matters to God. You know, it's an interesting thing when you look at that last verse. That's why I read that also in chapter 11. That verse 29, when I said, by faith they crossed the Red Sea as though it were on dry land, but the Egyptians, when they came, they were drowned. Think about this, friends. Some would say, well, you know, that's kind of a strange kind of picture. But is it because some are more worthy than others? No, don't go there. It had nothing to do with worthiness. But it's because one people had looked to God and said, God, we recognize we need to be led out of captivity. We have to trust in you. And because of that, they walked through those very waters that drowned the faithless. Think about that. If you catch that in your spirit, it will change everything. They were able to walk right through the very waters that drowned those who could not trust and would not trust in God. Are we getting this? I hope we are. I'm going to round it up by just saying this. Jesus puts it this way. He says, he who believes shall be saved. Try to reflect on that. Outside of your religious box. So, don't put salvation in some kind of, in the sweet by and by type box. Salvation in Scripture always refers to this life and the everlastingness of it, that it's going to last into eternity. But it begins now. The quality of life has changed now. Think about this. He who believes. Believes what? Believes that God will pour out His Spirit upon all flesh. All of it. There's not going to be any barriers. No age barriers, young and old. No gender barriers, your daughters and your sons. No class kind of barriers. Your servants, even the bondservants, those who didn't expect to be part of the blessing shall become part of the blessing. No barriers. No racial barriers. No language barriers. No color barriers. No barriers. None. Just read the beginnings, right? Everybody gathered around and listened to this sermon from everywhere. We call John 3:16 the gospel in a nutshell, or the little Bible, whatever, because it summarizes this. God so loved this world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes will not perish, but have everlasting life. Whoever believes what? What I just said. That God will give life meaning and purpose, pour out his Spirit, and let us know him.